All right, it is reading update time. This is going to be a bit of an unconventional reading update though, because as in the week where the only thing I had to talk about was She Who Became the Sun, I only have one book to talk about that I've read since the last reading update. So before I jump into that book and why it's one of my absolute favorites, I wanted to talk a little bit about TikTok and about doing TikTok and why I haven't posted in the past month. You know, transparency's good. It's been a wild ride. So the TLDR is that I have ended up taking about a month-long, completely unplanned hiatus while I've been moving, while I've been struggling to keep up with everything. As is probably evident from the phrase unplanned hiatus, I wasn't expecting to take this break. I have videos filmed and I will be posting them soon now, I think. But I was struggling. And I mean, it's a tale as old as time, right? You hear about all of these creators on TikTok, on YouTube, on Instagram who burn out and they have to take a break. And I always kind of thought, that will never be me. There's no way. These people just have not correctly optimized their posting. They're getting too invested in it. Because let me tell you the story of how I started TikTok. I started TikTok during the pandemic summer. Actually, it was the second pandemic summer. It was 2021. I started making weekly reading update videos on a whim, and I posted a couple of them to TikTok because I didn't really have anyone to talk about the books I was reading with because it was the second COVID summer. Things were starting to loosen up more than that first COVID summer, but at least where I was, it was definitely still hard to meet up with people in person, and I was really just feeling a lack of connection. So I posted these videos. I thought they'd get maybe like a couple views because they weren't like great. I was awkward, I talked way too high pitched and too slow, and I was just kind of rambling about the books that I had read. But people liked them and people found them, and then the third or fourth videos that I posted really took off. And so I was in a lot of ways very lucky in that I jumped to over 10,000 followers incredibly quickly. And that meant that very quickly I had to start thinking about things like setting up a TikTok email and navigating sponsorships and navigating receiving books for free. I did not have much of a learning period, which was fine. Like it wasn't a big deal. I had watched Book Talk for a bit before I posted anything, and also I had tried Bookstagram a little bit, and I'm also just pretty involved with beta reading for people and all those kinds of stuff. So I feel like when I started TikTok, I did know about author etiquette and that sort of thing, but I really didn't get much time to practice being a TikToker before I was one. And I'm not a social media person. I'm really not. I barely even post anything to my personal Instagram, but I loved talking about books and I loved talking about it with people on the internet. I met so many kind and wonderful and thoughtful people during those few weeks, and many of them I still chat with in comments and in Discord today. But I made a rule for myself because I knew I would need this rule to stop from just like completely getting overwhelmed and being too hard on myself and all of those kinds of things. My rule was, I'm doing TikTok because it's fun, and the moment that it stops being fun, I'll quit. For 3 years, I kept going and it was fun. Fast forward to the summer of 2024, and HarperCollins very generously and wonderfully invited me and many other book talkers out to New York for the weekend, and it was wonderful. It was so much fun. I could not believe it was happening. I just kept thinking, this is once in a lifetime. I don't really think of myself as an influencer. I really don't, but something happened with that trip, I think, where I realized, oh, like, this is like a job. To be clear, it's not that I was not professional or that I was flaky with sponsors or anything like that. I always have tried my very, very best to be as professional and as on it as possible, even though every now and again, of course, I've made mistakes. And I've been very, very fortunate to make money from TikTok, from things like sponsored posts and commissions and things like that, which I'm so grateful and I'm so glad that I've been able to do, because part of the reason I've been able to do TikTok for like 3 years is because of that support. Like, I was in grad school for 2 of those 3 years. I was living on a grad student stipend, not making much money. The money that I made from TikTok, I mean, it's been so helpful. And I recognize that it's all because of people like you who support me just by watching and liking and commenting. Like, I am so grateful, and I really, really, really never ever want to take that for granted. But so then what happened was I went to New York and I was like, this is amazing. This is like nothing I've ever done before, because they paid for it. I didn't have to pay anything. And it started to feel like a job, and that started to get super stressful. I spent the rest of June and the rest of the beginning of July just stressing over analytics, stressing over views, stressing over what I was creating and why it wasn't taking off in the algorithm, because this is around the time that there was this very really odd glitch in the TikTok algorithm where it was holding things in review for hours and hours for everybody. Like, if you looked at the TikTok Reddits, if you looked at Discords, everybody was like, what's going on? Everything's on fire. And I really felt like everything was on fire too, and I started to panic because I try so hard not to make TikTok into a numbers game, because in my mind, like, any numbers that I have are completely, like, I'm just fortunate. So I try so hard not to make it into a numbers game, a game of views, of likes, of followers. But when you start getting invited to New York, man, I don't know, the pressure just felt like it was on. And I wasn't doing well. My views weren't doing well. I was net losing followers. So I made myself take a break. And I was like, I need to just take some space. I need to get some space. And in some ways that was kind of scary, because I hadn't ever really taken a break much longer than like 2 or 3 weeks before. And of course in my head there's the sponsorships that I'm not getting and the opportunities that I'm not receiving. And of course the fact that I did net lose some followers, which again, all followers, like, I still think it's absurd that 100,000 people follow me. Like, that's ridiculous. And thank you. It's weird. I don't get it, but I'm glad. And so, you know, I dropped from 101.4 to 101.2 currently. I think in part just because, like, sometimes bots get cleared out. Sometimes people delete their accounts. Sometimes people are like, oh, she's not posting anymore. Like, why am I following her? I get it. I totally get it. But it's been kind of scary. And it's been good for me. And I think I'm getting ready to come back, because I think I'm starting to get the itch again. The itch to make videos, the itch to share books with y'all, the itch to be like, oh, you know, I start getting ideas and I'm like, oh, I should make a video about this. I should make a video about that. I want to share some thoughts about this and that. So I'm starting to get excited again, and it's starting to feel fun again. So thank you so much for all of your patience with me, and thanks for being here and for watching this video. I'm so grateful. And not only am I going to be posting on TikTok again soon, but I also want to be posting a lot more in the Discord. I want to, of course, be getting back on my regular schedule for Bindery here, and I think, as I've said in previous things, I'm starting to get my feet under me. Because yeah, I mean, I could talk a lot about creating and being a creator. Like, I'm a baby creator. I'm a really tiny fish in a really, really big pond. I do this, you know, part-time, but I could talk about how it really does kind of eat you alive, and how you never get to take a break from work. But I'm sure you've heard it all before. You've heard it from much bigger creators than me who have much larger and more stressful workloads. So, you know, I'll just be like ditto to all the things that you've probably heard before. And with that, let's talk about the one book that I've read. The singular book that I've read is The Virtue by Sarah Monette. Sarah Monette is actually Catherine Addison, who wrote The Goblin Emperor, but this series, The Virtue, is the second book in a series called The Doctrine of Labyrinths. The series she wrote first. I'm rereading it and I love it. It's everything that I love about The Goblin Emperor, in that it is a meticulous act of characterization, and the world building is huge and confusing and complicated, but it feels so real. And I would highly recommend The Doctrine of Labyrinths, although please do look up the content warnings first. It's much darker than The Goblin Emperor, and it's also just very frank about what it's dark about. I've heard someone describe it as a deconstruction of all the fantasy tropes about traumatic backstories, and how it would actually not be fun at all to be a beautiful sex worker or a highly trained assassin, and how all of those things in a typical fantasy setting where, you know, everything is like, it's awful. I mean, none of that is fun when you're in a fantasy world. Highly recommend. Mildmay is one of my favorite literary characters. He's one of the main characters of the series. His name comes from the phrase, mild may your sufferings be at the hands of the wicked. And if I were not too much of a perfectionist to get tattoos, I would get that tattooed on my body.